Peace. You want to go on to the next two bills? Okay. Is that consensus, Gengi? Okay. At this time, we'll thank Mr. Stefan for his presentation, and we'll take a 10-minute recess, and we'll come back. The planning department did send us really good answers for Bill 103, which might pre-answer a lot of your questions. So you guys got 10 minutes to read as much as you can.
Chair, before we recess, could we adjourn this, or could we defer this item if there are no objections from the members?
Yes. If there are no objections, the chair will defer this item.
No
So
objection.
deferred.
No objections.
And we will go into a 10-minute recess to return at 3:03.
Thank you, Chair Powell.
the Disaster Recovery International Affairs and Planning Committee return to order. The time is now 3:06. Thank you everyone for that recess. For the next two items, I'd like to take up DRIP 2, Bill 103, 2024, amending chapters 19.08 Maui County Code relating to resident density within residential districts, and DRIP 3, Bill 104, 2024, amending chapters 1904, 1908, and 1929 Maui County Code relating to kitchen, Maui County Code on dwelling types and density within residential districts. The proposed CD1 version includes the following amendments. Amends the bill's title. 2, amends section 1908-020 Maui County Code for consistency with dwelling types inserted into the table of development standards such as single family, duplex, multifamily. Number 3, in section 1908.020 Maui County Code replaces long-term residential dwelling units with the type of dwelling units allowed. 4, allows one dwelling unit per 5,000 square feet of lot area instead of one dwelling unit per 2,500 square feet of lot area on the islands of Maui and Lanai. 5, exempts multifamily dwellings of up to 3 units in residential districts from landscaping requirements for parking areas. And 6, incorporates technical and non-substantive revisions. The committee may consider whether to recommend passage of Bill 103, 2024 on first reading with or without revisions. The committee may also consider the filing of Bill 103, 2024 and other related action. Bill 104, amending chapters 1904, 1908, and 1929 Maui County Code for kitchens, kitchenettes. Purpose is to same title. Proposed CD1 version 1 incorporates clarifying revisions to the bill's title and purpose statement. 2, removes the requirements for dwelling units with kitchenettes to be occupied on a long-term residential basis and to have one additional off-street parking space for each kitchenette from the definition of kitchenette, and inserts the requirements into chapter 19.08 and 19.29 Maui County Code. And 3, incorporates technical and non-substantive revisions. Also, an amendment summary form, 2 amendment summary forms dated March 12, 2025 from myself, proposing to amend the proposed CD1 version of Bill 104, 2024 by reducing the number of permitted kitchenettes in a dwelling unit from 2 to 1 with the county residential and rural districts on Maui and Lanai, as well as 1, amending the definition of kitchenette to add the phrase that is internally accessible via an enclosed living area, and to prohibit gas appliances and prohibit kitchenettes to a number of departments. We can take action today. If we don't take action today, we'll either have to schedule a recess date or wait until after budget. That being said, because it's so complicated, I don't want to rush anyone, although I'm talking fast, and I don't want people to feel uncomfortable that they're passing something that they don't fully understand. So we'll just do the best we can. If members can think as we work, if they'd rather try to find a recess date or hold off until after budget, or if everybody understands everything perfectly and are for it, we can try and pass it today. So those are kind of our options to keep in mind. I guess our hard stop might be 5:30. I know we're losing at least one at 4:30. So we have member Kama. Yeah, I was told. So those are the things going on in periphery of what's Bill 103 and 104. So at this time, I'd like to receive opening comments from our resources, and then we'll take testimony, and then we can get to it. So, yes, Member Kama.
So if we had to recess this meeting, what would be the next date to?
It would probably have to be sometime before the 25th or no, we likely won't be able to get a recess date.
So you would defer, adjourn, defer, and then continue at the next,
After budget, because this is our last meeting before budget.
yeah.
It's a heavy meeting, but, you know, we hit the ground running with 105 because there were people waiting to submit their permits and they had like so much time with their insurance. So we had to start with that one. Oh, shoot.
That's not good. That's not a good sign.
Chair, could we take a 2-minute recess to reestablish internet connectivity?
Yeah, we're going to take a little recess and we'll come back at 3:17. Will the drip,
Be out right now.
thank you,
Be out right now.
thank you. Corporation Council?
Jeez.
Test. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I was asked to address a few different items in correspondence. I understand the chair would like me to prioritize a couple of the responses. I did not have the opportunity to provide a written response, but Chair, if you want, did you want me to go over the Act 39 items now?
Yeah, Act 39 in your opening comments.
Okay, there were a couple of questions on the State Act 39, which I believe is now codified in HRS 46-8. 46-4.8, I believe. That requires the counties to no later than December of 2026 provide for the allowance of 2 accessory dwellings or the reasonable equivalent on any residentially zoned lot for each the requirement of allowing at least 2 accessory dwelling units on each residentially zoned lot, because whether they're designated accessory or just dwelling units, you're talking about 3 dwelling units. And because the legislature put the language in accessory dwelling unit or its reasonable equivalent, I believe that allowing those 2 additional units, whether they're designated as accessory, is consistent with that purpose. However, there's no definition of what accessory dwelling is in the state law, unfortunately. There's nothing there precisely. There's a definition in the county code, but not in the state law. So for me, logically, allowing at least 3 dwellings on every lot within residentially zoned lot would be the equivalent of 2 accessory dwellings. Without a clearer definition, it would not be as clear as simply saying each residential lot is allowed 2 accessory dwelling units. This bill would allow for at least 2 additional units, but would not necessarily characterize them as accessory. So if you wanted to be 100% certain, you could allow for 2 accessory dwellings, but I do believe this bill, because it allows for 3 dwellings on each of those lots, accessory or otherwise, would be consistent with the purpose of Act 39. To back up a bit, Act 39 does require that by December 2026, that there be these provisions in place. If the county doesn't do that by that time, anybody who applies for an accessory dwelling unit or 2 accessory dwelling units on the lot would have to be granted a permit with some exceptions, which would allow for denial on the basis of infrastructure design or development standards. Now, again, compliance with that law isn't required until December 2026. So whether you do that through this or some other bill, or there's still questions after this, there could potentially be adjustments prior to December 2026. But I think the question was how this is addressed. Is this addressed by this current bill? And I do believe allowing 3 dwelling units would do that. Also, allowing 2 accessory dwelling units on each of those lots would do that as well. And then the other questions involved in this were whether there is a ability to to allow additional, to clarify in the purpose of the bill that this is, these additional units are considered the reasonable equivalent of those dwelling units. And I think that that's acceptable as well. And then finally, one of the questions asked was whether or not the requirements of Act 39 apply outside of the residential districts, specifically the county rural district. And the Act exempts any property outside of state urban designated lands, and it also does not apply, in my opinion, in the county rural district. there's language in the bill that says it excludes lots in a county zoning district intended for rural, low-density residential development. And I would confirm that that would include 19.29, the county rural district. So those requirements of Act 39 would not apply outside of the state urban designated areas under HRS 205, as well as county rural districts. So it essentially is going to apply to the county residential districts. And it does, again, it imposes the requirement to allow for 2 accessory dwelling units on those residentially zoned lots. It doesn't define accessory dwelling units, and it does allow for the use of the reasonable equivalent of 2 accessory dwelling units to satisfy the requirement. So I do believe that this bill would satisfy those requirements, but to be 100% certain, simply allowing the 2 accessory dwelling units rather than saying just an additional dwelling unit that could be a main dwelling would be one way to do that. But I still think allowing those 2 units would be the reasonable equivalent, whether or not they're designated as as accessory.
Thank you, Mr. Hopper. Any opening comments from Captain Voss?
No comments at this time, but here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any opening comments from Director Molina?
Hi, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Jordan Molina, Director with Public Works. I just wanted to note that we didn't get our responses to the committee's letter back to you folks. And so I can provide those responses now if you prefer, or I can bring them up later.
Let's see if
As the committee
people have
wishes.
questions on it. But when you get a chance, if we don't vote them out today, we would appreciate the written responses.
Okay, thank you,
But
Chair.
if we vote them out today, then no need. Okay, any opening comments from Environmental Management? Director Agawa?
Hi, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Nothing in addition to our written responses to the questions, but if you folks have any questions, feel free to ask and I can help answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. I did like the examples that you gave of the building permits. And last, we have Office of Recovery, who I believe has a presentation for us.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a few slides. If staff could bring them up, I'll try to go quickly. And I'm just trying to cover some of the things that have been discussed in the prior meeting. But you can proceed to the next slide, please. So, the intention of introducing these was initiated as a result of the disaster, and it was in response to comments that were provided by the community of the way that housing had developed in the Lahaina area pre-fire, and that there was a desire to reconstruct those things, although they were called nonconformities at the time. That was not factual. They're just strictly illegal improvements. And so we wanted to try and provide a way to legalize that. If we could proceed to the next slide. So basically, West Maui was affected by a housing shortage prior to the fires. It primarily consists of smaller sized lots. And the pre-fire needs for housing resulted in customary use, including additional units and kitchenettes that were not able to be legal and were not therefore inspected or compliant with existing code. Office of Recovery's preferred outcome would be to empower residential owners to take housing solutions into their own hands and acknowledge past trends by creating a process for legal construction of improvements in compliance with our code requirements. Go to the next slide. There was a little discussion about Act 39, and I know that the chair put forward a proposal that the density bill 103 be adjusted to 1 unit per 5,000 square feet. We'd respectfully put forward the consideration of 3,000 square feet per unit. And the reason for that this would allow zones R1 and R2 to participate in this change. The R1 minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet, but it allows for 1 ADU. With a 3,000 square foot minimum, there could be the 2 dwellings, and it would allow R1 through this measure to be compliant with Act 39. The other is R2, which is a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet and allows 2 ADUs. They would be able to get the additional main with that provision. If we could go to the next slide, please. If you look at a zoning map of the Lahaina area, you'll see that the majority of the fire-affected area in yellow is R1 and R2, with essentially the Wahikuli area being R3. And so the majority of those areas wouldn't be able to participate in these increases in options for them unless we were to come to a conclusion of the existing proposal of 2,500 square feet or 3,000 square foot per unit consideration. If we go to the next slide. There was also concern raised by a Lahaina resident during our last meeting about the sufficiency of parking. And there was a proposal, which was a good idea, to consider doing parking by bedroom as opposed to square foot, which we do now, because, you can fit more bedrooms in the square foot. Like, there's a more accurate reflection of the number of drivers by bedroom as opposed to total square footage. So what I'm proposing is on the left side, and the table on the right side is what's existing. It's a screenshot from our existing zoning code, 19.36B. But that for single-family dwellings, that studios and 1 bedrooms have a requirement of 1 stall, essentially be treated as equivalent of accessory dwelling units. For 2-bedroom homes, that there be 2 stalls. For 3-bedroom homes, that there be 2 stalls. But as you start to go up to 4-bedroom, that you add 1, and so on for each additional bedroom above 3 bedrooms. I think that would be a good balance for what is intended by this legislation, which is smaller scale dwelling units, but it would also account for scaling up. And then the final thing, and it may be unnecessary at this point, but I do want to share it just because there was concern about condominiumization, but I think that it has value in this consideration because it allows for fee simple ownership. If we go to the next slide, please. Essentially, these will amount to smaller size homes and smaller size yard areas, and those will be valued or priced lower than larger homes with larger yards. The ownership, a fee simple ownership allows for building equity of property owners. And I think that is really something that we need to try and find for our community members. Having housing is fantastic. It's very important. But if we can help them get to the next level economically, I think that's very beneficial for them over the long term. And providing a condominiumization situation doesn't preclude renting. And, there was discussions in the prior item and discussion of tax structures and things like that. I think that is a way to address second home ownership. We go to the next slide. I know that you're all aware of this, but I just want to go over this. This is the reason that fee simple home ownership is critical. This is the rate of inflation. This goes back to 2005. The reason this is deceptive, and this is straight from the Federal Reserve, one of the Federal Reserve banks. The reason this is deceptive is because this is the rate of inflation period to period. It's always up. It's just how much up it's going. And so if we can go to the next slide. This is also from a member of Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, and this is the difference in $100,000 between 2005 and 2024. And it's basically 61% inflation is the real. So the rate that you saw on the prior slide, that's incrementally how you get to 61, I'm sorry. And so if a member of our community is able to buy into one of these attainable houses based on their scale, and they lock in a mortgage, if the federal government inflates the money supply, they don't get harmed that way by that. If you're renting, your rents adjust upwards, and you can be in a sort of a treadmill. So anyway, I just wanted to advocate for that feature, and that's all that I have to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. And last but not least, we have Deputy Director Yogi. Any opening remarks?
Good afternoon. No, I'm just here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Let's see. Did any of our resources have any opening comments? I know planning did 103 and 104. Anyone else have opening comments on 104 that I missed out from folks? Seeing none, okay. We'll move on to public testimony for DRIP 2 and DRIP 3. Please let us know which item you are testifying on so that staff can time testimony for each item separately. If you are testifying on both items, please let us know when your testimony for the first item ends and your testimony on the second item begins so we can adjust the timing. At this time, we will call on testifiers wishing to testify on DRIP 2 and DRIP 3.
Thank you, Chair. First up to testify, we have Mr. Tom Crowley on Teams.
Mr. Crowley, we're ready for your testimony.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'll try to be as brief as possible. On Bill 103, I support the reduction to one dwelling per 5,000 feet from every 2,500. As Mr. Hart just said, that really is not going to change things in R1 and R2. And I don't think there's any reason to change things in R1 and R2 because one house plus two accessory dwellings is a lot already on a really tiny lot like this. But it would allow in R3 zoning to at least have one more main dwelling, and I think that would be the prudent way to go about this. I also support the parking requirements that Mr. Hart just presented. I think that's a better way of going about it. And I support the terminology changes that the chair has put forward from long-term residential housing to the more descriptive terms of single-family, duplex, and multifamily, because that is how insurance companies rate properties. They're going to give you an insurance policy on a single-family home, and that's going to be a different insurance policy than a multifamily home. So I think it's important to maintain that. I am very interested to hear more from fire, wastewater, and the other departments on exactly how this additional density would impact their reviews of individual applications. I don't want to set people up for failure and say we've now passed this, but now when the guy actually submits it, he finds out he has a whole bunch of new requirements that are on him that didn't apply on that first or second dwelling and that kind of thing. So I look forward to hearing that discussion. Moving on to Bill 104 to reset my time. I support the reduction from 2 kitchenettes to 1 kitchenette. I think that's prudent. And also making clear that you have to have an internal connection to clearly define that this is a single family dwelling unit. We just happen to have this extra kitchen. Now, if we happen to close that door and use that as another unit to separate people, that's fine. But it's still a single family unit. I am reminded of a property that was in agriculture zoning where it was like a 5,000 square foot house, and the guy hung 4 units off of the side of it, with each of them containing what was supposedly a wet bar, okay? But essentially he turned one single family house into an apartment building with 5 units. And that obviously is what we're trying to not have happen here. So again, going back to, I think 1 additional kitchenette besides the kitchen is proper. I do have concerns, however, when we make these new definitions of kitchenette and we change existing definitions and so forth, that this could create some problems for existing BMDs that have been approved in their current configuration. So I really don't like this particular thing that says we shouldn't allow this for any short-term rental kind of thing, because let's keep in mind, we only have 146 B&Bs, and we really have had very few, if no, new applications since we've put the 5-year ownership requirement in place. And I would hate for this new change to then be misinterpreted, and then we have problems with the existing B&Bs getting what they already have in place approved at their renewals and such. So I don't think there is a need or a concern for these units that we might be creating being turned into B&Bs. And let's say even if a few were, isn't that what we're going for? We want to actually make people be able to afford their own housing. And when someone can use one of their rooms as a B&B, that helps them afford their housing. So again, I don't think you need that. And I do think that you should wait until after budget to take action on this. There is an awful lot here, particularly this, how many square feet are we going to allow an extra dwelling? If we're going to double the density in some of these areas, I don't think the public is really aware of what that really means. And I think you would want to have a public hearing and make sure that the public understands what is being proposed here. What keeps going back in my mind when going back to this condominiumization is I look at Lahaina and I look at this broad area where I just know, unfortunately, that a lot of these owners are not going to be able to rebuild their homes. They're not going to have the financial resources and so forth to do so. And they're going to sell those lots to someone who is going to try to maximize the use of that lot. And I am very concerned that if we allow this condominiumization, you're going to see those lots fill up with second homes. I really am concerned about that. So again, we have more work to do before passing that, and I think we need to think about that between now and the end of budget. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. Members, any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. If you can call the next testifier.
Yes, the next person to testify is Mike Moran on Teams, followed by Jonathan Helton.
Aloha, Mr. Moran. We're ready for you.
Aloha, Chair and committee members. Speaking for the Kihei Community Association today, and we're just addressing Bill 103, and we did submit written testimony on it detailing the various segments of it, but I'm just going to address the one portion that we did have some objections to, and that was in the CD1 version number 5, which is exempting landscaping in the parking areas. We feel that landscaping is such a small portion of expense overall, and it's such a need for our species, for us humans, to have trees, particularly shade trees. We're constantly fighting that battle, particularly because we're always speaking for our district in South Maui, where we seem to have a dearth of trees. And as someone mentioned to me, and they said, well, South Maui includes Wailea. Wailea has lots of trees. And there was I didn't see it myself, but someone referenced to me a study showing that how the economic structure of a district is reflected in how many trees and how much shade they have in it. And in essence, it's saying that the poorer the area, the less shade, the less trees they have, the less nature in there. So we feel that this is a relatively easy thing to do, and that we're constantly advocating for more trees. We've been working with the commercial parking areas where they're required to have a tree for so many parking stalls. But we see what happens is that they cut the tree down to what the late Ernie Resents told me those are lollipop trees. Those aren't, they just cut them down. So we feel it is, particularly if this is going to be for not for the exclusive areas, that it's good to include trees for all the benefits. We know the benefits, how they clean the air, they provide shade, they just uplift human beings when they're in there. So we know this is only a small portion, and we do think you're never going to finish this up today. But if you would consider that as you proceed on this a big measure that you're working on. So mahalo for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Moran. Members, any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. If you can call the next testifier.
Chair, the last person signed up to testify is Jonathan Helton on Teams.
Mr. Helton, we're ready for your testimony.
Apologies, Chair. His mic is now enabled.
Oh, Mr. Helton, your mic is now enabled, and we're really ready for your testimony this time.
Okay, awesome. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm on my laptop. I don't think my camera is working.
We can hear you.
For the record, Jonathan Helton. I work with the Grasser Institute of Hawaii. I do a lot of our land use and property tax related research. I want to reiterate some of my comments that I made at the last hearing on Bill 103. The Grasser Institute supports this bill. We believe that it will allow people to build homes that would help them support intergenerational wealth if they're able to build an ADU or even a second ADU or second dwelling in their backyard. We believe that this would legalize the kind of communities that we want to see in the future. That is, communities that are more walkable, that would help reduce development pressures on rural and agricultural areas. But real quickly, based on the discussion today, I do want to offer 3 comments. The first relates to CPRs. There's been some question about whether or not CPRs should be legal for units that would be legalized under Bill 103. I think that there's some merit to having CPRs as an option. Mr. Crowley mentioned that people rebuilding in Lahaina, a lot of them were underinsured and they're going to have to sell their land. Well, that's true, but there's another way to look at it. If they're allowed to do a CPR and put multiple units on their land, perhaps the CPR would allow them to get additional capital so that they could actually rebuild their house. So now they have 2 units on that piece of land. They've got a little bit of extra money to put into rebuilding their primary unit. And in general, allowing something like a CPR as opposed to a rental would allow families the flexibility to build equity if that's better for them. Some people don't have the capital to simply build an ADU and then rent it out. The second comment I would like to make relates to the amendments about density. I know the Office of Recovery has suggested 1 dwelling per 3,000 square feet. I think that's a reasonable compromise, as it would allow some of these folks who are looking to rebuild to add that additional dwelling. As a reminder, if you are in an R1 or an R2 lot, you are only allowed to build 1 dwelling and 1 ADU if your lot is the minimum lot size, which is, of course, 6,000 for R1 and 7,500 for R2. So the passage of this bill, and if it were to be set at 3,000 square feet, would allow for additional dwellings. And the final thing I'd like to point out is that I looked over the report from Aqua-Coast Design earlier today. On page 110, it actually discusses Bill 103. And the authors mentioned that even if you passed Bill 103 in its current form, it would not allow the density necessary to build many of the middle housing types that they talk about. So what they're saying is, and this is my understanding of their report, is that even if you passed the current bill with no amendments, that it wouldn't legalize a lot of the different types of designs he mentioned. So I hope the committee considers that when discussing whether or not the density levels need to be decreased to 3,000 square feet or to 5,000 square feet. So those are some technical comments, but again, at the end of the day, Forestry Institute of Hawaii believes that the approach this bill is considering is a good approach. It's going to help people get more housing. It's going to help housing be more affordable and abundant.
Thank
And
you,
I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mr. Hilton. Were you only testifying on Bill 103 or also Bill 104?
For Bill 104, I had submitted written comments, and I think I'll just leave my oral testimony for Bill 103.
Okay, I did have a question, clarifying question. I couldn't hear you when you said allowing something like a CPR as opposed to, I didn't hear what you said after opposed to.
I apologize. Again, I'm on my laptop. I think my audio is probably bad, but I said as opposed to like a rental, if you were to put up an ADU, typically your only option would be
Sorry,
to rent that.
can you speak a little bit louder? Sorry.
Yes, sorry. It would be a CPR as opposed to a rental, because that would be really the only option for a second unit would be a rental if you did CPR.
Thank you. Members, any further clarifying questions for the testifier? Oh, Member Sugimura. Oh, Member Sugimura, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. And Mr. Hilton, could you repeat your third item? You had 1, 2, and 3.
Yes. So the third item on, I believe it's page 110 of the
110.
Opticos report, they point out that even if you passed Bill 103 in its current form, it would not permit the level of density necessary to build some of the missing middle types that they discuss in the report.
Okay. And the report again was what report?
That was the report from Opticos Design. It was the second report, the deep dive that they put together.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Any further questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Chair, that's all the individuals signed up to testify. If anyone in the audience or on Teams would like to testify, please come up to the mic and begin your testimony or use the raise your hand function on Teams, and staff will unmute you. I'll provide a brief countdown. 3, 2, 1. Seeing none, Chair, no one has indicated that they wish to testify.
Thank you. Members, any objection to closing oral testimony and accepting written testimony into the record?
No objections.
Okay. Consider oral testimony closed for Bill 103 and 104. We can jump right into discussion. We did have a lot of transmittal back and forth and really good comments. It seems as though most of the resources being asked the questions on CPR did not support prohibition of CPRing. And so, I mean, Mr. Hopper is prepared to answer questions regarding that, but just throwing that out there. Planning, before we go into actual questions, did you want to go over a summary of Granicus 48, your proposed more amendments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, that has just been posted as Granicus number 48, as the Chair mentioned. It's a very minor amendment the department is proposing in the ASF for Bill 103. There was an amendment number 5 that exempts multifamily dwelling units of up to 3 units in residential districts from landscaping requirements for parking areas. And so that was added to the ASF, and we agree wholeheartedly with that. But we found another item within the code which relates to the, bear with me for a minute, I'm pointing it out correctly, relates to the number of parking spaces and whether or not you can basically park in tandem and related to those parking spaces. So we wanted to add the same requirement to a certain section within the code, and that's noted in Granicus number 48, which would, so right now the code requires parking spaces to be arranged so that ingress and egress to a parking space has to have at least 18 feet distance between the parking space and the street.
And currently that is not applied to single-family dwellings or duplexes. So we want to also not apply that to multifamily of 3 units or less. If we did apply it to multifamily units of 3 or less, as it is in the current code, then you would need 18-foot distance between your parking space and the street. So therefore, you couldn't do tandem spaces for a multifamily dwelling unit. So that's basically the gist of the amendments, fairly minor. And that's, again, in Granicus number 48. There was another minor amendment we wanted to propose in for Bill 104, and I can go over that later if you like, or now.
Now it's good.
Okay. In Bill 104, in amendment summary form number 1, which is in Granicus number 29, this is very minor. On the very bottom of the page 1, it was a proposal to amend section 7 of subsection 19.29030A7. And right now it currently says, the amendment currently says, on Maui and Lanai, all principal or accessory dwelling units permitted under this section and so forth. We just want to remove the phrase or accessory dwelling, or accessory, because this does not apply to accessory dwelling units. In other words, kitchenettes cannot be an accessory dwelling units. So that was just an error, and we just remove the words or accessory from that phrase.
Awesome. And any comments from Mr. Hopper on concerns to those 2 amendments recommended by planning?
Chair, I didn't hear anything offhand that I would have a concern with.
Awesome. Okay, let's jump right into it as time allows. Like the testifier said, I'm not sure we will be passing it out today, but we can work as though we were and get as much done as we can. We'll start off with, I know that Member Kama has to leave. Do you want to go first, Member Kama, or do you just want to go with the regular lineup?
I could go first, Chair.
Okay, let's start with Member Kama since she has to leave at 4:30.
So I wanted to ask, Mr. Crowley made a comment about that this might impact, the second kitchenette might impact B&B. So I wanted to ask Mr. Hopper what his thoughts were on that.
Mr. Hopper?
Remind me, if you could, what provision we're speaking about in the bill? I have the revised version of the bill. Yeah, so, well, if it's on a long-term residential basis, if that's not considered consistent with a bed and breakfast home with a kitchenette, that could, I guess the concern is that, and planning could confirm this, but if the kitchenettes are only allowed in an area with a long-term residential basis, if you had a kitchenette, that area wouldn't be available for a bed and breakfast home use. I would presume that's the concern, and it seems like that would be the intent. But planning can confirm that, but I think that's the issue.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing was in, I think, the presentation or in the bill, it says 1 dwelling unit per 2,500 square feet of lot area. I think there was a question about 5,000, 3,000, but I think I like the fact that we want to put more on as much less as possible and still get what we want out of all of this. So I like the idea of having the 2,500 square feet of lot area. Just want to throw that out there because there's a lot of discussion that went on, and I liked some things and I was questioning some things, but that's one of the things I did like. Also, the need for trees. I really believe that, if you look at areas where you have lots and lots and lots of trees, the people in the community are so much more happier. And that's why if you look at Wailea, yeah, they got tons of trees because their HMO is high and everybody down there pays for that. But not that the people in Kehe are not happy, but they could be a lot more happier if they have more trees. So I like that idea about hopefully having more trees as opposed to less trees. After all, we do depend on them to breathe fresh, clean air too. So, but other than that, Chair, for now, that's what I took down, that's what I noted, and that's what I am supporting.
Do you want Fire to have any comment on the tree issue, I know we
Oh, that's-
did update the fire code that trees are not supposed to be within 5 feet.
Of the right, yeah.
Did you want them to comment?
Yeah, let's ask them that.
Or Mr. Post as well. Go
Oh,
ahead.
Mr. Poston.
Yeah, if you don't mind, if I can jump in on that
Go
one.
ahead.
I think what we heard from the testifier was there is an exemption from requiring 3 units or multifamily units of 3 or less from complying with the landscape parking requirements. That is I think the concern that I heard. And the reason why we exempted multifamily units of 3 or less from complying with the parking landscape requirements, because the parking landscape requirements are pretty intensive. They apply to very large parking lot areas, requiring low walls to screen parking spaces, requiring landscaping to screen parking spaces. And so for as small as a development of 3 units or less, we didn't feel that the landscape requirements were necessary for that.
Okay, well, good one. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Sure thing. And I just wanted to mention Director Agawa also needs to leave at 4:30 p.m. But he did answer all our written questions quite thoroughly. But if anybody has questions for Director Agawa, he will need to leave in 30 minutes. So I'll go back to our committee vice chair, Nohe Hodgins, for her opportunity.
Thanks, Chair. I'm gonna just say a couple of thoughts and then I'll share my questions. Thank you for not putting a CPR lot requirement or barring that requirement. Personally, I have 2 brothers. Sometimes they do good and sometimes not so good. And right now, I think that's what a lot of people are going through. And most likely, if we don't figure this out soon, majority of my age people are going to own property by inheriting it. And if they wanted to build on it without being tied to their brother, who maybe sometimes doesn't do so good, we're going to need separate mortgages in order to build a home. And I don't think my mortgage should be tied to his mortgage, and his mortgage should be tied to my mortgage. And right now, I think it's going to cost roughly about $500 per square foot. And so none of it's quite cheap. None of it we're going to be able to really fund ourselves. So to have people to be autonomous in building a home, probably next to what's going to be your sister or your brother or your cousin in my head, because I don't want to live too close to a stranger. So the assumption that we're just going to sell to some random person is, in my head, unlikely, as I can only assume what I would do. And I wouldn't want to live so close to some random person. But that's just my perspective, and I just wanted to share that. I also agree with Mr. Hart at going down to 3,000 square feet for your second dwelling, so that we can capitalize on some of the R2 lands as well. I do have a question though. I appreciated very much planning's, I guess, I don't know, scratch paper back to see what this is gonna look like a lot. But I wanted to understand with your design of how this would work this is an R2 lot. It's at 7,500 square feet. And the parking code is used here with the 19.36. What would it look like if we needed to use the parking suggestion by Mr. Hart with bedrooms? So in this case, we have 8 stalls. What would change? What would this look like? If you could describe that for me, please. Or you guys want to tag team this description, would be great.
I think Mr. Hart's proposal on bedrooms, I think, is a good one, because that really ties it into really kind of how many adults really are in a bedroom, right? And how many people can use it. It's kind of a question of how many bedrooms can you get into really then a dwelling unit. In this particular example, or the quick sketch, there was potentially for the first and second floor of up to 3,500 square feet. So you're looking at a 1,200 square foot unit, 3 1,200 square foot units are probably 3-bedroom units, right? My guess. for potentially 3 of them. And so then I can't remember what the parking requirement was, but I assume it probably, does it increase, or was 2 and 3 bedroom units were 2 per unit, right? I think is what you were proposing.
Go ahead, Mr. Hart.
Chair, thank you. So I was proposing that 2-bedroom units be the existing 2 as well as 3, and then when you go beyond 3, that it step up for each bedroom.
So I think in this particular instance, assuming that each dwelling unit would have a 3-bedroom, they would still be each require 2 spaces, so you'd be in the same configuration as what you're looking at here.
Okay, great.
Although, if I may, just also while you're at it, in this particular sketch, importantly,
Why didn't I think of that?
that code amendment that I mentioned to require parking, being able to park on your driveway is important for this particular instance because it's a multifamily. So if we didn't have that, you couldn't park this configuration like it's shown right here. You'd have to park other spaces somewhere else on the lot, which would restrict then the size again.
I do like the tandem parking. Thank you. Thanks, Chair. I heard the bell.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify what I heard you say, because I have a chance to, because I'm the chair and I run the show. So what I heard you say is that you like the 3,000 recommendation because it would allow us to maximize the density in R2, but you didn't mention R1, and 3,750 square foot would allow us to maximize the density in R2, but not R1. So did you intentionally leave out R1 because you didn't want to maximize the density in R1? Or?
Not necessarily. I don't necessarily, I'm not against it. That was his suggestion. I do have 3,750 if that's R2, and that's to separate R2. But Mr. Hart mentioned 3,000 and R1 and having that. And I see that the last time it was, and the original bill was 2,500, which would kind of change the language. I'm just saying that's what he said. I have nothing against R1. It would allow R1. I agree. But in my head, if I owned R1, I'm not too sure if I would maximize. As Director Blystone said, it is your choice. I'm not too sure if I would maximize all of this possibility if I lived in R1. Again, it's a personal choice. I probably don't want to live super close next to strangers. That's what I meant.
Okay, and just to clarify, the original proposal from the administration was 2,500 per square feet per dwelling.
Yep.
I countered with 5,000 square feet.
I see.
Mr. Hart came back with 3,000 square feet.
Yes.
But not all of those are proposals.
Yeah.
So just clarifying for people, you know, if you don't want to allow 2 dwellings in R1, which is a maximum of 6,000 square feet, allowing 1 dwelling per 3,750 would allow for 2 dwellings in R2, which is a maximum size of 7,500 square feet. It would allow for possibly 3 dwellings if your lot is 11,000 something in R3, but not 10,000. It wouldn't allow for 3 dwellings at 3,750, but at 3,000 it would allow for 3 dwellings. So it's all part of the discussion. We're not tied to anything. I think 2,500 is the lowest we can go, and the situation as it is right now is the highest we could go. So just wanted to clarify that. We're not tied to 3,000. We're not tied to 5,000. Just 2,500 is the ceiling, I guess, and the current is the floor, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. Okay, Member Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and fire off some quick questions. One for Director Angawa from Environmental Management for Wastewater. Are you available, sir? So if there is,
I'm here.
If there's 3 dwelling units on a lot, are they going to require a clean out adjacent to the curb for each one? Like each one would have a home run from their dwelling to the curb? Like, they're not going to be interconnected. You're going to have each dwelling on the lot would have to have its own sewer hookup.
Thank you for
I don't want to get overly
question.
technical,
So-
but I'm just trying to figure out, because my next question or comment, if I may, I'm supportive of the CPR aspect, because I think if you don't have CPR, is basically what you're doing is you're creating rentals. So if you have 3 CPR units, potentially with 3 separate owners, getting in the weeds a little bit, are they going to have their own sewer hookup?
So thank you for the question. So to answer question 1, which is related to question 2, a single-family residential lot would have 1 sewer lateral. So multi-units would need to tie into that single lateral. I do want to make it clear that if the flow sewage volume exceeds 1,500 gallons per day, then they would be required to put in a sewer manhole, property sewer manhole, in lieu of a clean out. So 1,500 gallons per day would be the trigger for that. Now, keep in mind the difference in cost to the property owner. A clean out may cost them $2,000-$3,000. I talked to a resident in Lahaina recently. They got quoted $35,000 for a sewer manhole. So it's a big difference in cost. So just, for people's awareness, if you have these multi homes on a single lot and they exceed that, they're going to be required to put in a sewer manhole.
Okay, thank you,
But a
sir.
single,
And thank you, not to cut you off. And then for Captain Boss, for this additional density, is there a potential that additional fire hydrants would need to be installed in a neighborhood?
It is possible, and it comes from a few different directions. There's a lot we have out there for 3 dwellings, and I know currently we've already kind of amended the code a few years ago to allow for 3 dwellings on residential lots. And even with this, we're going to lower the square footage so we can get more places with 3 dwellings. Our biggest concern is when it goes to 4 or 5. That's when there'll be extra requirements that they may not be able to meet, which could include fire hydrants, road widening, and that kind of thing. So for some people, that won't be an issue, but in certain properties, that could be. It could be what makes it infeasible or even impossible to build that 4th dwelling.
Okay, so anyway, we're kind of getting a framework. I heard the bell, Chair. Thank you. I will wait for my next question for planning.
Okay, I did want to follow up with Director Agawa because he's leaving in 15 minutes. Will they not know if the sewage flow volume is in excess of 1,500 gallons per day until they build what they build, and then they could be on the hook for that additional $35,000 for the sewer manhole?
So it's based on an estimated amount when they apply for the building permit. So for example, I believe a single family 2 or 3 bedroom unit, there's a chart. It assigns 350 gallons per day. So the chart would have to be referred to, and that would give an estimated amount of sewage.
Oh, so they should know before they build it if they're going to go in excess of 15,000 gallons per day, like an estimate.
Yes, and there is something in the code. I don't know exactly the code number, but after a 4th unit, I think a sewer manhole is automatically triggered for a lot or a CPR lot.
And when you say 4th unit, is it irrespective if it's a dwelling unit or an accessory dwelling unit?
It's just a structure considered a residence, so it doesn't, distinguish between ADU or main home.
Does it distinguish between attached or detached, like duplex? Like if you were to have 2 duplexes, that's 4 units, but that's 2 structures.
That's a good question. I would have to go look at the code to see how defined it gets. I can follow up on that.
Okay, we'll follow up in writing as well. Thank you. Member Johnson, your opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. Is Director Molina on from Public Works?
He is, or was.
Aloha, Director. Thanks for being here. I know you're busy. So I want to ask a question about the pre-approved plans that the department owns or possesses. Do we have missing middle pre-approved plans?
We do not have pre-approved plans as the way I think you're thinking of them. We have a design registration process which allows building plans to be approved prior to construction, but they're not available for anyone off the shelf to just pull them and use them for their project.
That's for developers, right?
It's for anybody that it makes sense that process works for, but generally it's people that are, I mean, it's more than one structure where it makes the most sense.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that response. I'm going to pivot here. I just wanted to ask that real quick question. So my next question is for Director Ogawa. I know he's leaving. So, and that question that Councilmember Cook brought up along with Committee Chair Bolton in regards to the sewer, we can put, or can we put a requirement to make these extra units, ADUs, whatever we're deciding to call them. Right now it's ADUs, but can we put low flow? Can we require them to have low flow sewer or low flow water fixtures or low flow just to reduce the number of sewer gallons they're creating?
Thank you for that question. I wouldn't want to speak for water on the low flow fixtures. However, the sewage is tied into directly to the water use. So that is a good question. So the sewer volume is directly tied to the use, but I cannot answer on the low flow. That would be a water.
Okay. I know it does come out at that end, but I'm just trying to solve that issue where they don't have to build a $35,000 manhole. Okay. Now my next question is, I want to say Jordan Hart mentioned it. The Waiakuli is exempt. Is that correct? Because it's resident 4 is R4 or R3. Can you elaborate on that?
Chair, if I can respond. What I was trying to point out is that the chair had put forward a proposal to increase the minimum square footage to 5,000 square feet. And that if that were done, only the Waiakuli area would benefit from the density proposal. But if it was bumped down to 3,000 square feet, then all of the areas shown, the R1 and R2 areas, including the R3 areas of Waiakuli, would be able to make use of the density increase here.
So bumping it down gives us more people that could be affected by it. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair. No further questions.
More people that can take advantage of it. We can send in writing your question about the low flow fixtures to the water department. Did you have more to add? No? Okay. All right. Let's see. Charlie, your opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Before Mr. Ogawa leaves, so you allocate you allow what, 450 gallons per day for 5 people? Is that what you said?
It is 350 gallons per day for a single family home is the classification.
And, okay, so and on average, how many people in the home?
I don't know if the code says that, but I would assume 4.
Okay. And then, so this includes water. What about if the new person rebuilding in Lahaina now has underground power and a separate line for R1 water, as well as sewer and water? Is this going to affect all these additional units? Is it going to get in the way of these additional units?
So for R1, R1 cannot be used on a residential property. Regarding sewer, you would have one lateral for a property and then the on-site plumbing would tie into that single service lateral for sewer.
How come you can't use R1 for residential?
Department of Health rules.
That's a great, yeah.
Is something that we're working toward though, at some point?
I don't want to speak for Department of Health. That has been talked about, but it is a health and safety issue.
Okay, and a quick question for Jordan Hart. Jordan, do we still have the R0 zone?
Chair, we do, existing in the code, yes.
Okay, so can you put an ADU in an R0? If we go to 3,000 square feet?
Chair, I would have to,
Okay.
I would have to read that carefully, but yeah, that's not the direction that
Okay.
this is going in, so I'm not prepared to respond immediately.
Okay, maybe you could respond in writing. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Planning, did you wanna take a crack at Charlie's question? In the chart that I saw on the bill, R0 wasn't included.
Yes, thank you, Chair. R0 is not included in the proposed bill, so the density increase does not apply to R0.
I think her question was if you can have an ADU on an R0 lot.
R0 is about 3,500 square feet. That's the smallest lot.
Unless you got non-conforming, because we have some of those in Lahaina.
Yeah. But they can send it, they can send their response in writing, that's fine. Because I know other people want to get to Shane before he has to leave.
Okay. Let's see. Member Sugimura? Your opportunity, you're muted.
Yeah. So, I actually want to ask Jordan Hart a question. So if anybody else wants to ask Shane before he leaves, please take this opportunity. It's
Member
almost 4:30.
Sinensi, did you want to ask Director Agawa a question? Okay, you can go ahead, Member Sugimura. Of the people that are still here, everyone else had their opportunity.
So when I went to the action meeting in Lahaina on the beginning of the month, I spoke to one of the residents, and on this item of parking per bedroom, I like that idea, as that's what he was saying. He was saying that at the end of his street, there's this house coming up and has 12, I think he has 12 people or 12 bedrooms, but he said the street is getting just crowded with parking. So how do we do this? So if Lahaina is already rebuilding and it's rebuilding in error, I think, sounds like from his description, what happens and how do we convert from this to whatever the existing is?
Is that a question for Mr. Hopper, or you got it?
You know what? No, I don't. Whoever, somebody can answer it because
you got it. Okay, Mr. Hart.
Chair, thank you very much. So I did actually go to Lahaina with one of the residents who was providing concerns about overdeveloped lots, and
it's the same one, you guys.
Okay, so if it is the same person, then so a couple of the instances that he drove me by were existing homes in Waikuli, and those would be basically homes that were built. They're being used not in compliance with our code as far as a single family dwelling is concerned. The single family is defined in the code. So those would be potentially violations that could be followed up on with complaints. For new construction, there was also new construction instances of large-scale dwellings. Those would be covered by the existing table that's in the presentation that I made. I believe it is on Granicus, but I can't tell you the number. Unfortunately, you can get a significant number of bedrooms into a dwelling unit before you hit 3,000, which is when you have to do one more So anyway, the parking requirements are not potentially responsive enough. And so what I was proposing would allow it to be more responsive to require more stalls if you're trying to do that kind of scale of development. So those ones that got in under our existing code potentially would become non-conformities. And there may be a few of them, but if we can get this adjusted, we could catch the remainder. Thank you.
Are we talking about the same person? Okay, interesting. Well, appreciate that because I like this bedroom, parking increased by bedroom. And the idea of being able to, condominiumization, I think that's where everybody's trying to get to. And if the owner decides that's what they want to do, I believe that we should do that. And I like the idea of 3,000 square feet. So those are kind of my overall thoughts on this.
Okay, Member Sinensi, your opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a follow-up on Chair Lee's question, maybe to the department. She mentioned R0 that's not listed in this bill. So R0 would be, she mentioned 3,500 feet to 6,000? Just for clarification.
Mr. Post?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, the lot area required for an R0, which basically means you have a zero setback, is not less than 3,000 square feet. Not more than 6,000 square feet in area for the lot area. I might also add that accessory dwelling units are not permitted in the R0 zoning district as well, to address her question.
Only the main dwelling.
That is correct. Only the main dwelling.
But we're seeing a lot of like pre-manufactured homes. Are those for the smaller lots allowed as accessory dwellings?
Yes, they would be for the accessory dwelling units if you can meet the requirements for an accessory dwelling unit. There's certain requirements for accessory dwelling units on certain size limitations, parking and so forth. If you can meet those requirements, then yes, you could do a pre-manufactured home as an accessory dwelling unit.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Those were my questions.
Thank you. I would like to clarify with Mr. Hopper on Act 39. Would that apply to R0 if currently the county doesn't allow an accessory dwelling unit, but then Act 39 by December 26 requires us to allow 2 accessory dwelling units in the state urban zoning, which would include R0?
Chair, the requirement, let me just read it here.
And meanwhile, for everyone else, I did want to do a temperature check of what Mr. Hopper said in his opening comments. Are we looking at allowing for this bill and 2 accessory dwelling units, or are we looking at having the additional dwelling unit count as one of the required 2 accessory dwelling units? So something to think of. It could go either way. There's other things that could happen. You know, if we say in addition, then we would let 2 dwelling units in an R1 lot and 2 accessory dwelling units in an R1 lot. Same for R2. R3 could have 3 dwelling units and 2 accessory dwelling units. Each of those dwelling units could possibly have a kitchenette. So just some other things to ponder. about, possible unintended consequences. If we don't pass things out today, we could try to write to the Attorney General if she gets back to us in time, if she would consider one a dwelling unit and one accessory dwelling unit to satisfy Act 39 as the reasonable equivalent, and we could go that route. There was correspondence from planning that, an accessory dwelling unit on a R1 lot is restricted to like 500 square feet. On an R2 lot, like 600, and R3, 720. I mean, we could make it all 720 or not, So there's a lot of wiggle room because, I mean, if we're going with 500 for an R1, but then we're going to allow them a whole nother accessory dwelling or a whole nother dwelling unit that doesn't have any size limitation, it's kind of weird to say 500 for an R1, but you can build a whole nother dwelling unit. So just other things to ponder. But Mr. Hopper, you got to answer.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of quote the language. There's actually two different ways the county can comply with this. One is what we've been talking about mostly, which is we would need to shall adopt or amend ordinances defining reasonable standards that allow for construction of at least 2 accessory dwelling units or the reasonable equivalent for residential use on all residentially zoned lots. So R0 would be a residentially zoned lot. However, there's other options that the county can do other than that. For example, it can, there's a subsection C here that says that you can basically designate certain districts that are those 2 accessory dwelling lot districts, and they have to have certain criteria. For example, there needs to be an estimate that those districts would add development potential equal to half of the projected 5-year demand in a specific study laid out. That's an alternative. But if we're looking at it from the option A, which we've been talking about, which is to basically allow for accessory dwellings or the 2 accessory dwellings or the reasonable equivalents, R0 would be considered a residentially zoned lot. And then I will also say, though, if it's not done and someone applies, there can still be a basis for the county to deny those additional accessory dwellings, including based on infrastructure and other considerations. But the fact that it's R0, if it's a residentially zoned area, that would be the areas where they want the county to make the amendments to allow for at least 2 accessory dwellings. But again, there's an alternative, which is to create other districts that allow these versus others. And so we could look at that as a potential alternative.
Lots to consider. Okay, second, round 2, Councilmember Hodgins.
Thank you, Chair. I prefer Bill 103's density. I see from the old planning transmittal what it looks like if you have where it compares the minimum lot size with the existing code density and 103's density, and then Act 39 plus 103's density. That's thick. My question, though, is to Mr. Hopper. So, considering I prefer 103's density, if we use the floor to ceiling language of 7,500 square feet, and it doesn't allow for R1 and R0, does this comply? And then what about Molokai, who opted out of 103? And how are we going to let them know, like, hey, Act 39 is a little bit more nuts than what we're trying to propose, and just FYI, it's coming down the pipe. Like, what are we going to do here? Do we do some changes to 103 to incorporate R1, R0, and send it back to Molokai Planning Commission and let them know Act 39? I don't want to force anything down anybody's throat, and they opted out of this, but what does that leave us to do? Thank you.
Mr. Hopper.
Well, the 7,500 square foot discussion, I didn't quite understand that we can go over that. As far as, I mean, Molokai wouldn't be exempt from Act 39 any different than the rest of Maui County from the state's perspective. So they would, essentially, if the county doesn't enact anything and we get to, again, this is not until December of 2026, but if we get to that point, somebody on a lot there would, it looks like the law would say they would apply for 2 accessory dwellings, and the county would have to grant that unless there's some exceptions. Essentially, if it says if a county does not adopt or amend zoning ordinances pursuant to this section by December 31st, 2026, the county shall not deny any permit application on the basis of exceeding the maximum number of housing units allowed if any owner or their designated representative of a single-family dwelling in a residentially zoned lot applies for construction of up to 2 accessory dwelling units or the reasonable equivalent until the county adopts or amends an ordinance pursuant to this section, provided that a county may deny a permit application on the basis of infrastructure, design, or development standards. So, I mean, they wouldn't be exempt from that. So the county, if they continue to be exempted here, and again, they made a recommendation to exclude themselves, but the council could still not agree with that and include them in this bill. That's an option. Or another option is, because you have until December 2026, is figure out another way to comply with this law, either by some other form of amendments other than what's being proposed in Bill 103, or designating these districts in subsections C1 and 2, which appear to allow the county to not necessarily require these everywhere, but to create certain districts where they are required and subject to those requirements. So I think those are the options.
I think I understood everything you said, but I'm going to let that settle in my brain. And then if I have any more questions, I'll ask you some more questions.
I have to say that it was very difficult to explain Act 39.
Thank you.
In a way, I've had to go over it several times for me to get it and to try. And I think, I'm not saying I necessarily get everything, but to explain it, it's difficult because it's not particularly simple, and there's exceptions to exceptions, and it's difficult to deal with.
Thank you for saying that, because it is difficult to understand. Not that you're not explaining it well, it's just a lot to understand. So thank you very much.
And I just wanted to clarify, we cannot add anything about R0 in this bill at this point because the Planning Commission didn't consider that. Is that correct, Mr. Hopper?
That's also a good point, Chair, that all of the proposed changes were to R1, R2, and R3. So you do have a fair amount of flexibility with the intent of the original proposal, but if it included a district that wasn't dealt with at all, yes, I think that you most likely need to deal with that through a different bill or send something back to the commissions on that.
Okay. Go ahead, Director Blystone.
Just a small piece. I was doing some research while y'all were talking about the R0, and it only exists in a very small amount of places. There's one area in Kihei and 2 areas in West Maui, and 2 of the 3 areas are fully developed at this point. So just to rest assured that R0 is pretty minimal.
And Chair?
Go ahead.
Also, the exception that I read about the accessory dwelling units, I think presumably that would apply if the setbacks couldn't be met either. So I don't know what the R0 situation is, but if someone applied for accessory dwelling units that you could not fit in the setback areas, I think that'd be an argument that it did not meet the development standards. So.
Okay. I mean, I know Napili Hall, which is 0 lot lines, and I know Choke folks that have converted their washroom into an ADU, so it happens. Oh, Charlie, yes?
Yeah, so I don't think we should necessarily exclude R0 at this point. Maybe we can add it at a later time, but we want to give people the broadest amount of options possible. And also, I wanted to ask Director Molina, about if these ADUs could be these temporary homes now, if they would qualify for ADUs?
Director Molina?
So in terms of meeting the zoning requirements, they could. Now, whether the temporary units can become permanent is a separate issue under the building code that we are working to find paths forward for. Thank you.
Jordan, I hope you find a way, because we'd have to destroy or dispose of thousands of units, and when we could be using them.
We told them, be cautious, because if you cannot affirm compliance with the building codes, this is a bunch of rubbish on our island right now.
Okay. Well, maybe they can find a way to strengthen, fortify it. Okay, thank you.
And Charlie, I just wanted to clarify, you're saying don't preclude R0 from the discussion, but we can't include it in this bill because it didn't go through the planning commission. But
No, I meant at a later time.
Okay, you're talking about a different bill that does go through the planning commission.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I see members raising hands, but Member Cook was next, and he has to leave. So, Member Sugimura, is it okay to let Member Cook go? Okay, and then we can come back to you after, or we can go in order, whatever members.
Thank you. My question is for both Mr. Hart and the planning. Can 8 cars fit on a 7,500 square foot lot with 2 Ohanas and a duplex? Is there any, okay, we have hardscape aspects of it, but they can park in the grass or something. So there isn't any planning element, impediment. They just park wherever they can fit in there. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, basically, they need to be scaled appropriately, and single family can reverse onto a public street, as opposed to multifamily can't do that.
I'm sorry, a single family can what on the street?
Single family home, like you can park in your front driveway and reverse onto a public street, where like a commercial multifamily construction cannot do that. They have to have circulation to turn around and things like that. And then it's a 30-foot max height in the residential district, so you could build 2 full stories with space underneath. So yeah, you could do that.
Okay, that was my big thing. Okay, thanks. Okay.
I'll add, I'm sorry, you can also park in the setbacks as well, like side yard setbacks and all that stuff.
That's it. Cool. Thank you. Chair, that's really all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, it depends too if you have 1 story or 2 story. Like, I live on an R1 lot and we have underneath parking. So, it just depends on how you particularly configure your lot, the size of square footage of the rooms and like that.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm supportive of what we're doing. My only concern was about playing pretend of people still doing side street parking. And as long as we can stick with, if there is no side street parking, they have an option, then I think.
So it does sound like majority of people do like Mr. Hart's parking recommendation. Is that's okay. So we can incorporate that in the next iteration. Did you want to comment?
Chair, yeah, I got a text during the call, so I was told to state that DR funding can be used to pursue surface parking in the fire-affected area to support some of these neighborhoods that were much tighter. And then the other thing is that it can be used to support buses and potentially additional shelters in the context of the comment about parking enforcement is the carrot or the stick, but what's the carrot? And so anyway, I wanted to share that with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think Mr. Johnson had to catch the ferry, so that brings us to Member Sugimura.
Thank you. So going back to what Chair Lee was talking about with these temporary housing projects, in my community, I saw for the first time a recreational vehicle parked in an empty lot. I mean, and I just wonder how this all fits into this discussion. Somebody.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Who do you think would answer your question?
I don't know if Mr. Molina or even Mr. Hart, but this is at first, I think they have them in Lahaina, but the first recreational vehicle popped up on Kula Highway, and I'm like, holy smokes, here they come. Any comment on those and how this complies?
Thank you. Mr. Hart, did you want, or Mr. Post?
Yeah, really, a recreational vehicle is not a permanent use on a residential lot. So whether or not that's there legally or illegally, I can't tell you. It shouldn't be legally because it's not a permitted use on a residential lot. So it has to be a structure.
It's the kind you see on TV. And I was like, whoa, that's what I thought. So I hope whoever is trying to live there just know that it's illegal. And I hope this didn't allow for many of them to pop up like in parks, like a residential park of all these EVs, or RVs, sorry. That's all for now.
Thank you. I just have been informed that we're at bare quorum right now. So if anyone needs to pause for the cause or turn off their camera, we'll have to call a recess. And I have also been asked to ask Corporation Counsel for comment on Mr. Hart's parking proposal as we like it, but it didn't go through Planning Commission review.
Okay, clarify that the parking, is this one of the amendments, multiple ones we've talked about here? Oh.
It's in his presentation that he gave to us. I can give you, or Mr. Post can pull it up. It's suggestion on the left.
If this applies, yeah,
So, Chair, if staff could just clarify, I think previously Corporation Counsel opines that we could insert the landscaping for parking requirements into the bill so long as it was limited to multifamily dwelling units of up to 3 units in the residential districts, because it was tied to the original scope of the bill. So the question is just whether doing a straight up change from size of lot to number of bedrooms across all categories, including studio and 1 bedroom, would be within the scope of the original bill. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Chair. I think the problem is if you're changing the parking requirement for all units in the residential district in general, I don't think that's something the commission's necessarily looked at. It might be something that everyone favors, and again, this can be confusing sometimes, but it deals with what was the original proposal, and the original proposal was to increase density in these areas, and I think we talked about how that increased new density would be allowed with respect to those new units and the landscaping requirements, and I thought it was okay to make that change because it was dealing with only the new units and sort of was the conditions of those new units. But if you're making changes here that are going to apply to everybody, including existing units, my concern would be that that's a bit broader than the scope of the original bill and not something the commission within the scope of what they had reviewed. If we're talking about parking requirements on the new units that are allowed in these areas because of the increased density, I think that's fine, but I'm a little cautious of just generally amending the residential districts or the parking requirements for all new requirements that the commission hasn't reviewed yet. I hope that makes sense, but I would have a concern with that. That's a good point that you brought up.
Okay, Mr. Hart?
Recognizing what council just said, and this was thrown in to address the concerns that have been raised, but I do want to point out that this legislation wasn't created to address Act 39. It was created because it was trying to be responsive to legalizing the housing that existed pre-fire. I want to encourage the council members to consider moving forward with the proposal as it is, and that the Office of Recovery will commit to working with the planning department to draft something up to go to the planning commissions to try to catch up and get back to council while you guys are at a budget, and not to try to derail the overall initiative. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna lose quorum pretty quick here. I feel like we have things to incorporate and do, and then maybe we can meet up after budget, if that's okay. I think we made a lot of progress today, and I don't want staff to rush and get it all in there, and then maybe we have to do work on the council floor. We're missing 4 of our members, and it is a big, complex thing. So I will take up Office of Recovery and Planning's suggestion that maybe they can get this parking stuff through the planning commissions while we're in budget or somewhere thereafter. And we'll incorporate all the things that into the bill, and we'll send out a couple questions to the AG, Water Department, and like that. And we'll take this up right after budget. I mean, we've spent all our time on 105, 103, and 104 to date. And if that's the direction the committee is okay with, that's what I would like to do. Is there a consensus? Member Lee, is that consensus, or are you raising your hand?
Yeah, but I do have a question for Jordan.
Okay.
Okay, because Jordan, since you're going to be working on parking, I hope that you leave the language broad enough. Let's say a community decides to buy a lot in the neighborhood for community parking. So, you know, if people come up with creative ideas, you don't want to discourage them. So if you could include those types of allowances for parking. Thank you.
Okay, and we have held the birthday girl for 22 minutes after. So I think we deserve to let her go have a drink for her birthday. Unless Member Sugimura had a burning question.
I do. Are we gonna take this to the community and have, you know how
you want
I
a
don't know how we
public
take it
hearing or
to-
something, or a town hall?
Yeah, I think we need to, yeah, so that we can hear back from the community before we vote yes, you know? It's kind of interesting. I love, what Chair Lee just said, and if who knows what the community's going to come up with. Maybe everybody wants to have an RV park, which is, I just had one pop up in Kula, and I already heard concerns about it, but who knows what else,
Okay, looks like Mr. Hart wants to answer your question.
Chair, I just want to point out that there were 3 public hearings held for each of these measures, the non-conforming bill, the density bill, and the kitchenettes all had one public hearing each in each of the planning commissions prior to coming here. And then the one thing I also want to say is that under current situation, an RV park would not be legal and would not be made legal by what we're proposing. Thank you.
Okay, Member Sugimura, if that's what you'd like, maybe me and you, or I don't know, me and somebody can work on that offline, like just maybe a show on Akaku, we talk about it or something, but I think we'll have to choose one, I'll have to choose one person to work on this with.
I believe Member Sugi, oh, sorry, her camera's back on. Sorry, I thought we were losing quorum. Thank you.
Oh, I'll try to see one person to work on so I don't violate the sunshine law on this, and just see if we can do like a press release or maybe a question and answer session or something like that. But I'm gonna need help because I got a lot on my plate. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. If there's no objection, oh shoot. If there's no objection, I would defer these 2 bills and we'll take it up right after budget, and we'll work on a community outreach that's more comprehensive than the planning commission's public hearings, because only the nerds watch that. the planning nerds, which is not a derogatory comment. I mean, doesn't everybody want to be friends with them after high school? So, is there any objections to deferring these two bills?
No objections.
No objections.
Okay, these two bills are deferred. And this concludes today's Disaster Recovery, International Affairs, and Planning Committee meeting. Thank you very much, everyone. Now would be the time if you wanted to sing happy birthday. The time is now 4:55.
Okay.
Ready?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday,
dear Noe.
Happy
Happy birthday to you. Boy, we're terrible. We need practice on
Thank you, everyone.
synchronization.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, Noheng.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
The time
Okay.
is now 4:56, and this meeting is adjourned.